Coming up in today's newscast, Hamas reportedly agrees to an Egypt-brokered long-term ceasefire with Israel. Debate over the government's nation-state law continues to surge. And get ready for electric scooter madness. A new American transportation fad is about to hit the streets of Tel Aviv. Prime Minister Netanyahu has canceled a diplomatic trip to Colombia in order to convene an emergency meeting with Israel's security cabinet. Now, the stakes of this meeting are unusually high following reports that Hamas has agreed to Egypt's proposal for a long-term ceasefire deal with Israel. Details of this plan are still under wraps at the moment, but it could likely require Israel to ease its blockade of the Gaza Strip in exchange for the end to incendiary kite attacks in the south. Word is that an unnamed Israeli official has actually already been dispatched to Qatar to oversee the execution of this proposal. Egypt has reportedly agreed to permanently open its Rafah border crossing checkpoint to sweeten the deal for Hamas, but Hamas in turn would ultimately be required to hand over control of the Gaza Strip back to the Palestinian Authority's Fatah ruling party. Israel has been doing everything it can to end the daily barrage of explosives-laced balloons and kites from Gaza, which have scorched thousands of acres of Israeli land already. The weekly border clashes along Gaza have also threatened to spill over into war lately, with several Palestinians killed in recent weekends and one IDF soldier killed last month from Hamas sniper fire. But it remains to be seen if Israel would even agree to the terms of a Hamas ceasefire without the return of two fallen IDF soldiers whose bodies Hamas has held in the Strip for nearly 4 years now. This is in addition to two Israeli citizens, both believed to be mentally ill, who Hamas has held against their wills in Gaza for nearly 3 years. This deal would supposedly cement a 5 to 10 year ceasefire, but for now we can only wait and see to see if the compromises are good enough for all sides to agree. Well, after weeks of debate, defenders of the nation-state bill are today again emphasizing 2 points. One is that the law is not discriminatory, as some have alleged, and two, that the only reason people think that it is discriminatory is that they don't understand it in the first place. Well, returning now to the studio is the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Dr. Sherman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, for you, there's a distinction between a nation and a state, right? And for you, this amounts to a question of whether a law could potentially turn Israel into a bi-nation state.
Well, of course, the most curious and puzzling thing about the opposition to the nation-state bill is that the opponents want to include in a bill which relates only to the national rights of the Jewish collective a reference to the civil rights of a non-Jewish group which has no national aspirations, which is totally absurd. I mean, the whole argument is really contrived and has been hijacked for political purposes to denigrate the existing coalition. I think it's very dangerous because there is a clear difference between national rights of the collective and the individual civil rights of the citizens in the country, which of course not only under no threat, but they have a special additional basic law called the Basic Law of Human Dignity and Freedom, which anchors, according to the Declaration of Independence, the rights of all citizens who are equal before the law, as the High Court has interpreted that law. So the whole argument is really contrived and has been hijacked by the political agenda of the left.
Well, what do you say to members of the minority, like the Druze, for example, who do feel insulted or just afraid for what the law could do to them?
I find it very difficult to understand what they're insulted about, because they themselves say they have no national aspirations. So why would they want to be included in a law that talks only about the national identity of the country? I really think that in many cases we've come very close to incitement to insurrection with the Druze by political factors by political elements in Israel.
Well, as you know, the Prime Minister has announced there will be a special committee to examine either a potential future law or
that's fine. That's if you're really worried that the existing legal system, which has, as I said, the basic law of human dignity and liberty, doesn't sufficiently secure the rights of either all non-Jewish minorities or the Druze in particular. So you can legislate an additional law, but that's got nothing to do with the nationality bill. And in my opinion, the whole argument is completely, as I said before, contrived.
Sure. Well, it's definitely, I feel like the debate's going to be continuing for a while. Dr. Sherman, so I'm sure we'll see you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, despite the government's stance that Israel's nation-state law does not, in fact, discriminate against minorities, outrage from those minorities has boiled over into massive protests. Last night, tens of thousands of Israelis, led by Druze leaders, rallied in Tel Aviv to protest this law, one which nearly 2 million minorities in Israel say downgrades them to second-class citizens. Take a look at this.
أنا كنت أعتقد دائما إنه نحن مواطنين في دولة إسرائيل، نحن دافعنا عن دولة إسرائيل، نحن دفعنا ثمن كبير عالي وغالي لدولة إسرائيل، واليوم عقب 70 سنة بتيجي دولة إسرائيل بتقول لي ستوب، أنت مواطن من فئة ثانية، من فئة أقل.
We're now witnessing a wave of protests. The Druze protests and other Israelis want to change this legislation. There's now an opportunity to ensure that alongside Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, we will ensure that it's just as committed to our democratic components or to our democratic character, and to add an explicit allusion to the principle of equality. This can be changed and rectified and modified immediately when the Knesset convenes again, or immediately after the next elections.
When people ask us to consider ourselves, we consider ourselves as Israeli Druze. Today there is no the name Druze. It's a Jewish state, and we are not a Jewish. We ask the government and all the members of the Knesset to delete this law, not to correct this law, to delete this law from the history. We are loyal, we are equal rights, and we are fighting in very strong struggle to be equal rights with the Jewish people here, because we paid the ultimate price, the blood of our children, to protect this border of this state.
We are here to send a clear message to the Israeli government. We will not settle down for nothing less than equal rights as Israeli citizens.
ILTV's Aaron Porras joins us now with more on this story. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Brett, thank you. And as you said, as many as 90,000 Druze and other critics of the new basic law took over Rabin Square in front of the Tel Aviv government building last night. And as we heard from some of the protesters, they're calling simply for equal rights under the law. And even though Prime Minister Netanyahu and other supporters of the bill are saying it doesn't discriminate, clearly Israel's minority populations don't agree. In fact, there were multiple smaller protests across several Arab Israeli towns as well.
Sure. Well, we know also that not all supporters of the bill do agree that it's harmless. You know, several Knesset members, including Education Minister Naftali Bennett, have admitted that maybe mistakes were made in regards to the Druze anyway, though they do support this law overall. Now, Netanyahu did meet with Druze leaders last week who seemed to kind of accept some kind of terms of an agreement offered by the government to compensate them for this law, though, correct?
It's true that several Druze community leaders and spiritual leaders, and even former IDF Brigadier General in the reserves Amal Asad, met with Netanyahu and his team last Thursday, and they did agree to create a committee whose sole purpose will be to strengthen ties with the Druze, support their community, and recognize them and other minorities who are in the military for their contributions. But not all the members of that committee walked away happy. And in fact, it's been reported that Netanyahu himself abruptly left the meeting when the word apartheid was brought up.
Right, and this was mentioned at the weekly cabinet meeting today as well, and Netanyahu echoed exactly what you just said, as well as Israel's need for the law, saying that it merely enshrines that Jewish identity into the basic de facto constitution. Sure. So the question is, what comes next if this outrage grows like it has? I mean, will there be more laws to protect each individual minority that feels threatened by this new law, along with the lines of what's being proposed by the Druze?
Unfortunately, it's impossible to know at the moment. The end goal of the new committee is to anchor in law the rights and recognitions of the Druze and minorities who fight in the IDF, but not many Arabs or Christians fight in the IDF, unlike the Druze. Yet they still make contributions to the country, and in many cases they can choose to do civil service. But furthermore, no bill will ever see the Knesset, at least not until the winter session begins anyway. So we've got some time to kill before any real results will be reported.
Right. Well, when the time comes for that, I'm sure you'll be back with more. Thanks for the update, Aaron. Now, there's been a lot of mystery surrounding U.S. President Donald Trump's still unseen outline for a potential Middle East peace plan between Israel and the Palestinians. And for a time, it wasn't even clear if that plan would be made public. But now it looks like it may finally be coming to light. The White House has begun staffing a new Mideast policy team to span multiple units for possible negotiations, a big sign that this proposal could be unveiled in the very near future. Trump campaigned on his promise to deliver the ultimate deal of Middle East peace, tasking his son-in-law Jared Kushner with the difficult task that has eluded past presidencies. But skepticism remains high that the Palestinians will even be receptive at all, even to a good deal, following their outrage to several U.S. policy decisions over the last year. The rift first exploded following Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and to relocate the U.S. embassy there accordingly. For Palestinians, this was widely seen as an end to America's role as an impartial negotiator to the peace process. The United States responded to this by cutting hundreds of millions of aid dollars to the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, prompting the Palestinians to all but sever ties with Washington completely. But even as recently as last June, Jared Kushner apparently pressured Jordan to shutter that agency altogether by eliminating the refugee status of nearly 2 million Palestinians living in Jordan. Unlike most refugee communities all over the world, the Palestinians enjoy something of a rare exception. Generations after their original expulsion from modern-day Israel, they are still regarded as legal refugees by the UN. While some say that this exception is necessary given the dire condition of millions of Palestinians still suffering in refugee camps from their displacement, Jared Kushner allegedly argued the opposite, writing in an email that the NRWA is, quote, corrupt, inefficient, and does not help peace, end quote. Either way, any successful peace plan will need to get all parties on board. No easy task, as history has told us. Following the closing of Israel's Channel 1 last year, which was operated by the nation's broadcasting authority, former employees were absorbed into the public broadcaster's new channel, Khan. But before that, members of Khan's management allegedly put together a list of those former employees, including controversial comments, a list that was just made public, igniting fierce outrage and speculation of systemic misconduct. The former Channel 1 newscaster Amil Ivgi, for example, was included on the list. Next to his name was a comment which apparently read, ugly. Another veteran journalist was allegedly labeled with a comment that she was physically attractive but cold. Many others were said to have been ranked and categorized based on how much they apparently tolerated questionable conduct within the company, with labels suggesting various degrees of loyalty. Needless to say, if these comments were factored into any part of the company's hiring practices or conduct, as the list's mere existence seems to suggest to some, this would be tantamount to extreme discrimination. Representatives from Khan maintain that, quote, only professional and relevant information was used. The process of selecting employees was done only within legal frameworks and only on the basis of professional considerations, end quote. Israeli Communications Minister Ayub Kara, however, has demanded an immediate clarification from Khan on why the list even exists. Kara has made it clear that, quote, it is inappropriate for public body managers to classify good and devoted workers, family people, and first-rate professionals. Well, if you've ever had a credit card, then you hopefully already know the ins and outs of your credit score. But did you know that countries are also evaluated for an overall credit rating as well? That's right. An American financial company called Standard & Poor indexes the credit scores of nations all over the world to figure out which ones are most likely or least likely to pay back its debts. Well, good news for Israelis. S&P just gave Israel its best credit rating in the nation's history. With its stable economy and narrowing debt deficit, analysts have just given Israel's financial institutions a big thumbs up. Until now, Israel has had an A+ credit rating, but that's just been upgraded to an AA-. Now, if that sounds confusing, don't worry, you're not alone. The double A is actually better than a single A, even if it's an A+. This actually boosts Israel's short-term rating up an entire notch as well. So what does this all mean? Well, it means that Israel's overall financial risk is pretty low, both in terms of internal economic credibility and external trade collapse. Now, S&P has said that Israel's sometimes fragile political situation could jeopardize this rating, but citing past and future budgets of the Knesset, the organization predicts that Israel's economic growth outlook will remain solid and allow the government to accommodate pressures from social and infrastructure spending, as well as a potential moderate escalation of security risks. Needless to say, Israeli financial institutions are thrilled with this improved report card. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself hailed the credit rating bump as a, quote, reflection of the strength of the Israeli economy. From personal loans and mortgages to basically every other financial dealing you can imagine, sometimes we need a little help. But how do you know what's in the contract you're signing if you're not an expert or can't afford one? And we're not even talking about the slow pace, high cost of dealing with banks in the first place. Well, Uhura Solutions has just developed an incredible new tool that can read and understand those contracts and put it into a language that we humans can actually understand. And here to tell us more is Uhura Solutions founder and CEO, Juro Stojanovic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what does Uhura do?
So We started with we believe one of the key challenges that financial institutions face these days is manual processing of the customer contracts and agreements.
Okay.
And we believe how it's done right now, it's slow and efficient, and it's costly. And also customers hate all these processes and delays that impose on them.
And it's confusing.
So what we are doing, we're helping financial institutions to speed up the process of review and decision making by AI solution that reads and understand, extract the key provisions, key terms, understand, and trigger action and solutions.
Wow.
It could be for example, for your personal loan, it could be mortgage, it could be different type of the contract within the banking and financial institutions.
Wow, so you're telling me that it's an artificial intelligence system that analyzes the legal, complicated jargon and just kind of gives it back to you in a way that anyone can understand.
We are focused on the financial institutions. We use the latest AI algorithms, technologies such as vision processing to read the contract, to extract the key elements, and natural language processing to understand the meaning. So we are trying to replace the way how human process all these contracts, and with this, to speed up the whole process and make it transparent.
And you focus on the financial sector for now?
Yes.
And are you going to stay there, or is the idea to maybe expand into other markets?
So solutions, the platform that we develop is a general one. So the module that we are developing right now is for the financial, because we see that as a huge potential, as a huge market.
Also, everyone uses that.
Nevertheless, the same technology, the same concept can be implemented different type of the contracts, different type of the agreements.
Wow, it's amazing. I can tell you, I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be really grateful when they get to use this. Thank you so much for coming. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, maybe you think they're awesome, maybe you think they're coffins on little wheels, but for better or worse, electric scooters are here to stay. And now one US-based scooter sharing company is about to launch a pilot program for their two-wheelers here in Tel Aviv, which means that in the coming weeks we're about to see a whole lot more scooter action and madness on the streets, sidewalks, perhaps even roads of Israel's most traffic-congested city. Chances are you've already heard of Bird Rides Incorporated. Bird exploded onto the scene last year, dropping thousands of rentable electric scooters in 18 major US cities all over the country. Their small size, battery-powered engine, and cheap rental costs made them a favored way to get around major metropolitan areas. The units in Tel Aviv will cost 5 shekels, that's roughly $1.50 for each rental, plus half a shekel for each minute that you use it. And the best part is, whenever you're done with it, or even if you're just taking a break, you can literally park it anywhere. You just use an app to locate, lock, and unlock your vehicle when you're ready to ride. Obviously, though, the onus is on the rider to make sure that you park it legally, and of course that you ride it legally, which is something of an issue in Tel Aviv, a city where bike lanes, highways, city streets, and pedestrian walkways interweave sometimes seamlessly without warning. While Bird scooters will undoubtedly be a welcome new way to get around Tel Aviv, local traffic cops are probably bracing for madness. Deaths from electric bike accidents have surged tragically in Israel over the last 2 years, so please guys, remember your helmet and respect your fellow drivers on the road. Well, speaking of better ways to travel, United Airlines has just announced a historic first: direct flights between Washington, D.C. and the city of Tel Aviv. Believe it or not, this would actually be the first ever direct flights by a U.S. airline from D.C. to Ben Gurion. Pending government approval, the flights are scheduled to begin on May 29th of next year, celebrating 20 years of partnership between Israel and United Airlines. Now, typically, D.C. travelers heading to Israel have had to connect in Newark or JFK Airport en route to Ben Gurion. Needless to say, the promise of a non-stop flight is probably welcome news to frequent flyers. Only caveat here is that departures are set for DC's Dulles Airport, which is a bit out of the way compared to Reagan International Airport right off the metro line. But hey, I'm sure travelers will take whatever they can get when the offer is this good. Israel's Minister of Tourism Yariv Levin greeted the announcement with open arms, hinting at a possible political incentive behind the flight, saying, quote, "I congratulate United on the launching of another route between Israel and the U.S., a direct route to the White House." Officials at United Airlines say their company already offers more direct flights to Israel than any other provider out there. This new Tel Aviv-DC pathway could open as many as 70 additional connection flights across the U.S., and obviously it promises a whole new generation of tourists a chance to see Israel for themselves. The 4th episode of Sacha Baron Cohen's new TV series, Who is America, premieres tonight. That means we still don't know which politicians or celebrities will be apologizing this time tomorrow, but we do know that the series already has one entire country of hardcore fans. Yes, Israelis are obsessed with the show and, of course, with Cohen's portrayal of retired Israeli colonel/captain/general, whatever, Eran Morad. ILTV's Emmanuel Kodosh is here with the inside gossip about how Israelis are enjoying their new caricature. How's it going, Emmanuel?
Thanks, Brett. And that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be apologizing after tonight's episode. So like you said, Sacha Baron Cohen is playing his Israeli character, Eran Morad, who has already managed to embarrass few American politicians, including former Vice President Dick Cheney, whom he got to sign his waterboarding kit.
Saw that.
Former Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, who is seen endorsing a plan to arm kindergartners. And Georgia State Representative Jason Spencer is shown with his pants down, screaming racial slurs. Now, some Israelis are saying that they are, afraid the American public is going to be left with an impression that we Israelis are in fact gun fans, when the truth is our gun control is a million times stricter than in the U.S., and others have a different reaction to it.
Sure. Now, it's interesting to look at this because the U.S. response has been pretty interesting. Some of those politicians that you mentioned, they defend being, duped into the show.
Right.
Others, like Jason Spencer, as you mentioned, respond by withdrawing from politics.
Yeah.
But I feel like Eran Morad has already become the most famous Israeli in pop culture, despite the fact that he's not even real.
Definitely. Like I said before, some Israelis are concerned for the public's misunderstanding of the show and may think that Eran Morad's words and views are truly that of Israelis and our government, when in fact that is not the case.
Right. That's the satire there.
Exactly.
Right.
But most Israelis aren't even concerned, with that aspect too much. The reaction is mainly astonishment, first off, to the accuracy of Sacha Baron Cohen's portrayal, but more importantly, ridicule for the Americans who let him fool him, who let him fool them. Right. When I was watching the third episode just last week, I literally couldn't stare at the screen. I was so uncomfortable. Right. I was downright shocked at these interviews and, how ridiculous Sacha Baron Cohen looks in general. I think that the interview with Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore was one of the worst ones that I've seen.
Sure. So in that scene, to recap, Morad, who is suddenly a general now, by the way, he sits down for a one-on-one with former Senate Republican candidate Roy Moore. Now, Roy lost a special election to Democratic nominee Doug Jones last year, even after being backed by U.S. President Donald Trump, and that's most likely because of 9 allegations of sexual misconduct from many women who, some of them claimed that Moore assaulted them when they were as young as 14 or 16 years old. Right. So anyway, that's the background. Tell us what happened when Moore sat down and went head-to-head with Cohen. With General Morad.
With our general.
Yeah.
So Moore's sitting down to hear Eran Morad tell him about, quote, Israel's latest high-tech gadget called the pedophile detector. Okay. At first he says it comes from Israeli tech that detects Hamas terror tunnels. And then afterwards you can slowly see Moore get a little anxious.
Maybe because he thinks it's real at that point.
Yes, exactly. Cohen swipes it over himself and nothing happens, but then when he swipes it over Moore, it actually beeps and beeps and beeps. Now, naturally, Moore stormed out of the interview saying something along the lines of, "This is ridiculous, I've never been accused of such things," and so on. I'd call this one of the more cringeworthy, funny moments.
Yes.
But it was definitely uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, Moore would later accuse Cohen and the Showtime network, who airs the show, of relying on Israel's friends in America in order to, quote, embarrass, humiliate, and mock the Jewish state. Now, I wonder if that's how Israelis feel about it.
So honestly, I really don't think so. I've spoken to a lot, and I think that they love the caricature of it all. Plus, I find it interesting considering Cohen himself is an observant Jew who belonged to a Zionist Jewish youth group in high school and has frequently visited Israel. He speaks fluent Hebrew and is very knowledgeable in Israeli politics. So I do think he has his priorities straight when it comes to the main goal and, the general message of this show. It is not, at least in my opinion, in any way trying to shame Israelis, and instead aiming to expose those who he thinks deserves it.
Yeah, so here's how much I think Cohen knows his Israeli audience is out there.
Right.
There's like some Hebrew written on his shirt, right?
Yeah.
The little jersey was, but if you notice, it's actually written backwards.
I didn't pick up on that until recently.
I think only Israelis picked up on that.
Right.
Yeah, so watch out for it when you watch tonight's episode.
Definitely.
All right, thanks, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone.
Here comes our Hebrew word of the day. Well, the streets of Tel Aviv are about to be flooded with electric scooters, and that's why today's word is kolkinet, which is how you call a scooter in Hebrew. Now, there are a lot of reasons to take a kolkinet or a scooter out for a spin instead of your car. For one, it's smaller. For another, a kolkinet can be a lot more environmentally friendly if you're just doing short little trips in the city. And perhaps more importantly, there's nothing quite like the feeling of wind through your hair as you surf the streets in your kolkinet. Did I say hair? I meant your helmet, or the hair underneath your helmet through the... Just wear your helmet, guys, all right? All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be mainly clear and warm with a low of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius, and tomorrow will be sunny with little to no change in temperatures, and the high should be about 87 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.69 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News, and of course on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brent Allen Smith. Thank you for watching.